Okay guys, I'm just going to quickly run through the hip thrust, okay, and just make sure we go through some of the correct points of performance here, your pivot point on the bench, your foot positioning, and also range of motion, okay, to make sure you're nailing this movement in the gym. So let's just look at the pivot point. So when you find the bench that you're going to use, okay, we just want to make sure that we get our positioning right on the bench, okay. So what I'm looking for here is for the bench to sit just beneath the scapula, okay. You'll see there where Monica's scapula ends. So the bench is just going to go right there on the edge, okay. So that's going to be her pivot point, okay. So when she sets up on the bench, let's go. Okay, she's going to get comfy in that position. She's going to keep her chin down and just keep looking forward, okay. Once she's set herself up on the bench, then we're going to look at foot positioning, okay. So what I'm looking for here is a nice 90-degree, okay, angle. So her heel is directly underneath her knee, okay. If this is too far and forward in front, let's go. Good. It's going to put just too much emphasis on the hamstring, okay. So we're looking for 90 degrees here, okay, and that's going to allow us to get the best hip extension and just a full range of motion, especially on the way down. If her feet too far forward, then you can see it's going to put too much emphasis on the hamstring here, and she's most likely going to end up hyperextending, okay. So let's go back there to 90. Again, in terms of width, I just want to see your foot positioning just slightly outside of shoulder width there, okay. So let's go down into the hip thrust. All right, now this is quite important, is as she's doing the actual hip thrust, so on the way down, we're looking at trying to maintain this neutral spine position. So if you just come down onto the side, Sonia, and then just come a little bit down, just so you can see position of her spine. Okay, she's maintaining this neutral spine. As she comes down, it rocks back. Then she can drive up from here, drive up, and she's driving up to neutral position. Okay, she keeps her chin down, looking forward. She's not hyperextending up into that position, because that's going to then put too much pressure on the lower back. Come down. She's just coming up to here. Her glutes now are fully contracted, and she can rock back on the pivot point. Okay, maintaining the neutral spine. She's gonna, with the hip thrust, her knees are gonna slightly rock back, and then she'll drive up there, okay. What I see quite often, and what I'd like you to avoid, is almost this reverse crunch movement where the pelvis is doing too much of a tilt, okay. So then the lower back is working too much. I don't want to see too much of this curve, okay. Keep it nice and neutral, so it's similar to what it looks like if she's in a standing position, okay. Drive up again there. So when the hip thrust, okay, the hardest part of the lift is at the top of the movement. So we want to make sure that we spend as much time as we can up here. Usually hold for 1 to 2 seconds. Let's just do 3 reps, okay. So nice and controlled on the way down, up, squeeze and hold, and again nice and controlled on the way down, up, squeeze and hold, okay. Stop there. So now I'm just going to run through the difference between a hip thrust and a glute bridge. So if you're someone that wanted to train your glutes but not put too much emphasis on your quads, then you might want to switch from using a hip thrust to using more of a glute bridge exercise. Okay, so let's just look at the differences between the two. So let's go through the hip thrust first. Okay, so Monica's already set up for the hip thrust, so let's just do a couple of hip thrusts. Okay, so with the hip thrust, we've got quite a large range of motion. So Monica is going to drop down, okay, her knees are going to rock back, and then she's going to drive up into that neutral position. Okay, let's do one more rep. Okay, so she's coming quite far down, her knees are rocking back, okay, and then she's contracting at the top, keeps the chin down. One more rep. There. Good. Okay, now with the glute bridge, the main difference is we don't want to use too much of the quad, so we're going to shorten the range of motion. I'm going to stop her. As soon as her knees start to rock back, that's basically as far as she's going to go. She's going to drop down. There, her knees start to rock back, then she's driving straight up. Okay, so now we're taking the quads out and keeping constant tension on the glutes. Okay, so drop back. As soon as her knees start to rock, there, she's driving up from there. Okay, so now we're just focusing purely on the glute. I don't want to activate too much of the quad, and this is one way where you can really hit your glutes and try and minimize overdevelopment of your quads.